Okay, I will not wait for Chris. I'm sure when he joins us, he'll jump on, and we'll continue the conversation with him. So let's get started. Just want to make sure that you guys can see my screen okay, that you could hear me okay. And yes, I got a yes from you guys, so I appreciate it. So we're going to talk about weathering the storm. So how to build a robust disaster recovery strategy for ultimate business continuity and what that means. But because we have some people that were not familiar, that you guys are not familiar with me and who I am and what we're doing, let me help you get there. So who am I and why should you listen to me? My name is Ikram Masabini. I'm the CEO here at MVP Network Consulting. I started my career with a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering. I've been in IT for over 25 years. I'm dating myself here a little bit. I'm a HIPAA consultant. We focus on healthcare IT, manufacturing, and law. IT security consultant. So from that perspective, I have multiple technical certification. The list is long, so I didn't put them all there. And this is my email address. Feel free to contact me anytime. I did write a couple of books. So one is Cybersecurity Essentials for Business Owners, and the other one, Computers Should Just Work. If you guys want a copy of those, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to send you a free copy. Chris Warren, who just joined us. Hi, Chris. I see you just joining. Chris is a senior technical manager at Kaseya, Datto. Chris has been with Datto for 10 years. He started out as a solution engineer, and now he's the senior technical account managers for Blue Diamond Partners, which we're one of. So Chris was born and raised in Connecticut. I met Chris personally on a few times. A great guy. He graduated from the University of Maine and resides in New Hampshire currently. And this is a heck of a picture, Chris. Thank you for sharing that one. So let's talk about it. Could your business really survive a disaster? And the reason why we're bringing this up now is we looked at the old Farmer's Almanac winter, and in 2023, 2024, the area that we're in, we're expecting a very cold, snowy winter. So be ready for that. It's what they call the winter wonderland. So knowing that a lot of snow is coming, knowing that a disaster, natural disaster may happen, and we've experienced one last year. And so let's talk about what is disaster recovery. And the idea of disaster recovery is the ability to recover from a disaster, your disaster recovery. So if there's a fire, what can you do and how fast can you recover from a disaster? Business as usual after a disaster. So, but what about business continuity? And what's the difference between that and disaster recovery? The main difference is the ability to keep businesses running during the disaster, not after we fix the issue. So a couple of things we'll have to look at is lower recovery time objective. So how fast can we come back up and running, and try to eliminate downtime altogether? Even though a server may be on fire, or we have a disaster or an attack or whatever it may be, how can we continue to work while the disaster is happening? How can we eliminate downtime? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So did you know that 93% of companies with without a disaster recovery plan, they're shut down within a year of a major disaster? And we've experienced this. We've seen it happen to people. It's very important to plan for the worst and expect the best. We've said that before, but that's truer words have never been spoken. Not by me, I'm just repeating them. But let's talk about the perfect data storm. At the end of the day, more data is being created by all of us, right? Every day we create additional data. Amount of data is being stored is more than doubling every 2 years. Now, the value of that data is also increasing. Not only are we creating more data, but we're relying on that data more and more. So who do we owe money to? Who owes us money? What is what information are we keeping for our clients? Are we keeping PII? That data is very important. We cannot function without our data. Application and servers and all that aside, the data set is the important piece. So I want you to focus on, we need to protect that data. And that's that's whole idea of the webinar came around, is that we need to protect our data, and we need to make sure that our data is secured and we're able to work during a disaster. greater risk of losing data from either Sandy or server failures or a security breach are growing as well. So it's like the perfect storm. Amount of data is increasing, the risk of losing data is increasing, and the value of data is also increasing. So what can we do to fix this issue and make sure that we are protected? How do you protect your data and your business? I'm going to talk about 3 types of backups. There's your basic data backup service. I'm backing up files. Can restore those files. I have those files stored on a hard drive or on a remote system where it's a cloud backup solution. The only thing with data backup is you're just backing up the data, not everything else, like operating system and software and what have you. And if it's backed up, it's great. But if there is an issue, we have to fix the issue first, then do a restore, which takes a lot longer to do. You have to download that data, make sure it's all set after we fix whatever issue there is. Then you have disaster recovery, which is not just backing up the data, but it's backing up the data and the server and the entire image of that server and the operating system and the applications that you use to create that data. So it backs up the entire environment, and disaster recovery is the idea of having that entire set backed up, but then fixing whatever hardware issue, whatever issue we have, then we restore that data set onto new hardware or whatever the issue may end up being, causing that disaster to happen. But it's not just backing up data, it's backing up the entire server as an image. Then you have business continuity. So there's 3 levels here: backing up files, disaster recovery, which is backing up everything, but it's just a backup. We have to restore first. And then business continuity is while we're on fire, we can continue working with a plan. We have a plan of there is a fire, we can continue provide our clients with the service that we need to. So 3 steps we're going to talk about: know your risks, what they are, and how to protect against them. Implement the 1-2 punch. We're going to talk about that. And then be ready to respond. So we're going to talk about the 3 steps. So first step is really knowing your risk. So number 1, what causes downtime? What are those disasters we're talking about? So everyday disasters are hardware issues, corruption of data in a database or whatever it may be, connectivity problems. I can't work, I can't connect, lack of redundancy, lack of a backup or disaster recovery plan. These are some disasters, but there's site-wide disasters, natural disasters like Sandy or a hurricane, or catastrophic disaster like a big snowstorm that may happen, or an entire server farm going down, or a cyber attack. And let's not forget internal attacks as well. So these are causes of downtime. And we do here, but everything we use now is in the cloud. It's in this cloud server. It's on this cloud platform. Do I need to worry about backup, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity? And the answer is yes, you do. SaaS vendors, and SaaS stands for software as a service. So your Microsoft 365 cloud, your Google cloud, any other cloud provider, they do not protect your data. And this is directly from the Microsoft SLA, saying Microsoft is not liable for data loss due to application outage. Microsoft is also not liable for data loss due to deprovisioned user accounts. In other words, you remove the user, well, their data's gone. And we recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that are stored on these services through a third-party app. Google has the same type of language in their SLA, and so does most SaaS providers. So it's important to know that you need to have a tertiary backup when it comes to that. And Chris, you could jump in whenever you want to if you want to add anything to it. So let's get into some meat and potatoes. Grab something to write with. We'll get you there. So knowing your risk. This is some stuff that you should find out and to know exactly what your risk is. So where is your data? Where is it stored? How is it stored? Who has rights to it? How much data do you actually have? Is it 1 terabyte? Is it 10 terabytes? Is it 50 terabytes? Is it just a few gigs? And now you got to find out, how is it backed up? And is it backed up on your network? Is it backed up outside your network? Even if it's backed up on your network, is it part of your actual network, or is it sitting outside your environment? Because you really want your backup outside the environment, just being able to grab and back up what you have without being in the mix of what's in the mix of your network. Because if there's an attack, you don't want them to affect your backup as well. You don't want them to be able to log into your backup server and delete your backup. You want them to be able to, you want your backup to be secured, but to be able to back up everything that you have on all the servers that you use. And can you work if you experience a disaster? What happens if you experience a disaster? Is there a business continuity plan in place? And are there compliance regulation around your data loss? So that if you lose data, do you have to let people know? What kind of response do you have to have? It's important to have an incident response plan as well. And how much does downtime cost your business? Now you could say, if I'm down for a day, I'm okay, I'll be fine. Well, how much is a day really going to cost you? And is it ever one day? And what is that plan? So I put a little QR code here for everybody. And this is a cost calculator of what happens if you are down. And it asks you specific questions about the number of employees you have, the average salary you have, how much data you have, and it does the calculation for us. I'm going to leave this on the screen for a little bit so anybody can scan it and go to that calculator. Now, if you need it, we'll give you that link so you guys can use it. But what the calculator will do is will help you decide what's your recovery time objective, which is how long can your business be down without it affecting your bottom line. Seconds? Is it minutes? Is it hours? Is it days? And we'll also talk about your recovery point objective. So what is the maximum acceptable amount of data loss your organization is willing to tolerate? The questions look like this. It's not a long sheet that you fill out, but it does give you quite a bit of information because the results tells you if you're, in this example, I have 12 hours of time between backups is 12 hours. Recovery processing is 6.5 hours. And if you're paying your employees an average of 25 grand, you're down for 7 hours. It'll cost you $20,000 versus a solution where business continuity plan in play. It would only cost you 6 minutes and you'd be saving quite a bit of money. It's important to know what these numbers are. So important to know the importance of your data and where they are. It's not a matter of if, but when disaster will strike. Let's face it, it happens to everybody. So know your risk. It's very important. Number two, let's implement a 1-2 punch. In other words, let's implement a solution that will not allow you to have a risk. So we all know now that just traditional backup just can't keep up. In other words, backing up just your files is just not good enough because you're going to be down for an extended period of time until we fix whatever problem you may already have. So the 1-2 punch is we got to focus on backup, disaster recovery, which is secure backup of your business data, and timely recovery of operation. But it must work together with an intelligent business continuity solution. In other words, I may have a fire, but I'm still able to work. And what that would look like. So maintaining network uptime during a disaster, maintaining critical operations during a disaster. How can we make them all work together? And the reason we're saying that is data is one of the layers to defend. Now we have another training, another webinar where we talked about the 6 layers to defend and the tools we need to protect those layers. But data is the number one layer because if we protect our data, everything else is fixable. And the solution that we decided to work with and we've been working with is Datto. It's a Kaseya company. Datto has been around for many years. As I said earlier, Chris has been with them for 10 years, but Datto's been around for a lot longer. And the reason why we picked that is because Datto has a technology that they developed. They have a patent on it. It's called inverse chain technology, where backups are independent of one another's, and they don't rely on each other. But just as long as we have, sorry, Chris, I just got your message. I don't know if you're muted. Let me see if I can unmute you real quick. So bear with me. Sorry, guys. If Chris want to add some stuff to it, it's important for him to be available. Okay, Chris, you should be able to talk now. I can't hear you if you tried.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you fine. Hey,
All
Chris,
right.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Everybody, meet Chris Warren.
Hey,
Uh,
folks.
I
You're,
give you
you're doing a great job. I didn't want to interrupt you. I just realized I had no control from my. You're
here.
killing it now.
I appreciate it. Jump in. I'll continue on and jump in whenever you're ready to give us some wisdom here. So inverse chain technology, which is proprietary to Datto, it allows for deletion of recovery points from anywhere in the chain without interfering with the integrity of the backup. So it really is a way to make sure that backup is always secured, but it's always available, and retention can go all the way to infinite time retention. In other words, I deleted something 2 years ago, and I remember that file. We can go back to 2 years ago and retrieve that file for you. So how does that solution work? And Chris, I'll have you help and jump in here with the next slide. So
Sure.
it's a kind of a hybrid cloud backup solution where here's a protecting workstation or server we want to protect. We put an appliance on site, and that appliance then backs up every workstation and server that we decide that it's important to back up, and then does data replication in 2 secondary and primary data centers. One is in Pennsylvania, the other one is in Utah, and it's time-based retention or infinite cloud retention. So I'll have Chris explain that a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. So just to reiterate, hybrid model, right? So you have a local appliance on site, within your own infrastructure that's performing all of your local backups. That local device is your first line of defense, right? Has all your recovery points on it, has all your tools to perform recovery, perform virtualizations. These Datto appliances are acting hypervisors. So like, what does that mean? Essentially, like they're like their own little VMware or Hyper-V box. But since we're a Linux operating system, we're using something called KVM, which stands for kernel virtual machine, which gives you the business continuity aspect. So that local appliance, first line of defense, because it takes your internet service provider out of the equation. But all that information is transcribed out to the bicoastal data center. So that's where the hybrid model comes in. In the event that local Datto appliance becomes compromised, you can perform and get all that same exact functionality from a restored business continuity perspective out of our cloud. Full redundancy between the 2 data centers, Reading, Pennsylvania, and Salt Lake City, Utah. So if something's wrong with the local appliance, you're going to fail over to Reading, Pennsylvania. Something happens in Reading, Pennsylvania, you're going to fail over to Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City, Utah goes down. We probably have bigger problems than virtualization at that point. But yeah, we got you covered on every instance. And as far as time-based and infinite cloud retention goes, that just really talks about like how long we'll preserve backups in our cloud for you, depending upon the cloud model that you invest in. So time-based retention, for all intents and purposes, like someone might do a 1-year time-based retention. That means that we're keeping monthly backups for up to 1 year. So once it hits 1 year of age, you start pruning or shaving off. So we'll house up to 1 year of monthly backups within our cloud. Infinite cloud means that those monthly backups just roll on infinitely. So that's a different model. If you have a compliance you need to fulfill, like 7 years is a popular one for many. So you can kind of decipher what best fits your business model.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. So with all those backup happening, that data of yours is important. So with Datto, your data is completely encrypted end to end. Data is always encrypted in transit. It's encrypted at rest. It's encrypted wherever it may be with AES 256 encryption. And Chris talked about the scheduling and retention. Well, you could actually schedule your stuff to be backed up every 5 minutes, depending on the applications, what have you. But here's the options that we have. Every 5 minutes. So if something does happen, you only lost 5 minutes worth of data. You didn't lose a day worth of data because your backup is from yesterday, right? And then the retention could be all the way to forever, right? From 1 week retention, 3 months retention, or I want to be able to retain whatever file, whatever we had forever ago and have it working. So it's a very strong solution for backup and disaster recovery. But most importantly is really business continuity. So how does the solution accomplish business continuity? And it does it through three different ways. One is an image-based backup, and we talked about that. Instant virtualization of bringing a server up and running on that local appliance right away. And then backup testing, because everybody says, well, our backup is good. When is the last time you tested it? I don't know. I think a year ago. Well, what if you test the backup every time you've done a backup to make sure that the backup is actually good? And Datto has that built into the solution. And the reason why it's important to talk about this is we don't want you down. We want you up and running. And we want to make sure when we're going to go and try to use the backup that it's actually working, right? And it's tested. So instant virtualization is the idea of taking a server or a workstation that maybe have ransomware on it. And we say, well, guess what? You can't use it now, but we do know that we have a solid backup. And that backup happened a day ago before ransomware came in. And I can now make that Datto appliance into that server. It assumes the name, it assumes the IP, and you're back up and running without the issue. So images can be booted up locally on the Datto device or in a secure Datto cloud. So basically, what if you had a fire, not even on the ransomware, and all the appliances burnt, including the Datto appliance? We can actually boot you up in the Datto cloud and get you operationals. Should a local disaster occur, business can continue as usual, easy for me to say, I guess, in the Datto cloud. So help lower your RTO, reduce downtime, and then it does backup testing. And backups are only as good as the testing it performs. So it lets us know it's got completed and it got tested. And how does it test it? It tries to boot up that server. And if there's an issue, we'll get the issue. But if we get a screen verification that that server got rebooted and that it verified the bootability of the backups, it assures that you will be able to use the backups in case of a disaster situation. And it also does more than just, it boots up more than just the operating system. We can tell it to verify essential services and application, and it tries to start them in the backup, in the testing phase, which is key to making sure that your data is secure, your environment is up and running, and you're able to use it.
Yeah, we have all different kinds of integrity checks and ways of kicking the tires, after a backup's performed. And all these tests are done on the Datto appliance. It's not done on the production machine. So we're not taking away resources or bandwidth or anything away from the production machine. We're grabbing over those changes that have occurred and then, really putting it through the tests and putting it through the ringer to ensure that those backups are concrete and sound.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, any disaster that may happen, the first thing you look at is, do you have a solid backup that we can restore from? If you have ransomware, if you don't have a solid backup, then we may have to pay the ransom. But if you do, and it's protected and it's ready, well, we're just going to make sure that the bad actors, the hacker, is not on your network anymore, clean that up, and then restore from backup, and you'll never have to pay a ransom. I call Datto the ransomware killer. It is great when it comes to that because it allows us to really secure the data. And they do have other solutions. Instead of actually having an appliance on site, they also have cloud continuity for computers and servers where you could actually do a straight backup from your local device directly to the Datto cloud and not go into a local appliance first. And we can restore a full PC. Now, I recommend this cloud continuity for PCs for executives that are maybe your HR person, your financial person. They may have application that other people don't on their local machines, and we want to secure that local machine independently of everything else because they're not saving stuff on the servers because they are, they're holding data that's very important to them. Having cloud continuity for PCs is key there.
Yeah, one of the beauties of cloud continuity for PCs too is also targeted for the road warrior. So the folks that are out, on the road, not in the office, maybe cannot VPN back into their local network, but want image-based backup. As long as they have an internet connection, we're just going to pull block level changes, every time they're connected, almost consistently, concurrently throughout the entire day. So very easy set and forget type mentality.
And it works great, and it has saved quite a bit of our partners. I can promise you that. And they have that same solution for servers as well, endpoint backup for servers, where it goes directly to the cloud with the inverse chain technology. But it's going directly to the cloud is up to 6 terabytes of data per server. Obviously, if you have a local device, then because 6 terabytes is a lot of data to move over a cloud. That's why a local appliance may be needed as your data set grows. And it does that for Azure as well. So if you're on a Microsoft platform, M365, if you have Microsoft servers or servers on the Azure platform, you need to back that things up. So that needs to be backed up as well, and it needs to also be protected. And whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Google, wherever you may be, you still need to protect that data, and Datto allows that. So, Chris, you want to show us some magic?
I can certainly do that. I think you got to give me some sort of a co-hosting power, though.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the power to be. Now you're able to, I should allow you to, yeah, you should be able to share your screen now. I can make you a presenter. Go ahead.
Okay. So I now have some tools on my left side. So screen sharing. Okay, should be pretty intuitive enough. Okay, browser. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
The system works. Okay, good.
All right.
All right, very good. So what you're all seeing right now is I'm actually VPN'd into a local Datto appliance at the headquarters in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I'm on the Protect tab right now, and it's just giving me a list of all the production machines or assets that I'm currently protecting to that local Datto appliance. Everything's identifiable by a host name and corresponding IP address. And you'll notice each one of these protected assets has its own set of submenus that are identical, but it's pertinent or relative to that particular production machine that I'm backing up. So just kind of quickly to echo a couple things that Ikram was showing earlier, if I click on manage recovery points for this 2016 server, it brings me to a list of all the successful backups that have occurred between that particular server and that local Datto appliance. And you can see in here like the screenshot verifications that we were talking about earlier. Ready? So that's where we're spinning up a virtualization on the Datto appliance because they are acting hypervisors and taking a screen grab of when you get up to the Control-Alt-Delete screen. It gives you that warm and fuzzy feeling that like, hey, everything I've been working on all day long is in a bootable state. So that makes me sleep well at night. I can take things a step further, in terms of ensuring that certain services are being invoked that are pertinent to the workflow if I want to. The local verifications that are happening as well. The volume, all volumes are protected. The state of the VSS writers. We depend on VSS to perform image-based backups. File system verification, and also ransomware detection. Our ransomware detection has a really cool way of going about things. It's all about layering these days, and most folks go about ransomware detection by looking for specific file names like WannaCry.exe or something like that. And to be honest, that's kind of a pain because you're constantly updating a database of new potential threats out there. Datto comes at it from a different angle. We look at, we go into all the different directories and we're looking for, file size changes, file extension changes, ranges of entropy. Essentially, things are indicative that something funky is going on in conjunction to what we've previously backed up. And we give you a heads up about it. We give you a warning, let you know that something weird is going on in this particular directory. You probably want to run your anti-malware, your spy bots, whatever you use to clean up, just to make sure everything is functioning as it should and that you haven't been, penetrated. So if I go into the Restore tab now.
Before you get there, I'll throw the ransomware detection piece here because ransomware is rampant now. But when you get ransomware, by the time you find out you have ransomware, it's probably been on your network for a week or two because it takes time to encrypt all these files. So it's actually living in your network, doing work behind the scene before it becomes an issue. And having an appliance that tells us, hey, you may have ransomware happening right now because we've discovered something, we can then stop it before it really becomes an issue. Obviously, there's other security tools and what have you, but having at least a solid backup solution that lets you know what's happening in the data that you're backing up and analyzes that data as well, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, and I also know before actually I jump out of here, I want to reiterate the whole inverse chain technology thing, which Ikram mentioned is proprietary to Datto. Nobody else does that. So like Ikram said, what that means is every backup is independent of one another. No backup is reliant on another one. So I'll give you a quick example of what that all means. So you can see I have like all these hourly backups on here. I'm basically doing backups from 8 in the morning to 6 at night, Monday through Friday, when folks are making proprietary data set changes. Let's just go back to the 26th here. So let's go back to Tuesday. And you can see I've been running hourly backups like all day long. And let's just say I came in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I started making a change in some database that's on this particular server, and I closed out of the database, before 9 o'clock, and then I started working in other applications on that same server, whether it's documents, whether it's spreadsheets, whatever it is. And then around 4 o'clock that day, I said, hey, you know what? I want to go back to that database I was working on earlier this morning just to see how my changes are working. And I launched that database, and it's crashing every time I open it. I can't get it to work. It's not functioning properly. It's become compromised. And I think to myself, oh my goodness, I made some changes and I ruined something on this server. I just want to revert back to the way things were before I made these changes. But on top of that, I don't want to lose any of the changes that I made since then in those other applications and those other documents and spreadsheets and whatnot. How do I do that? So what I can do is I can go to my data appliance and I can virtualize any recovery point I want. And I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But essentially what I can do is I'll virtualize my 8 o'clock, and there I can verify that that database was functioning, as it should before I made any changes. It works perfectly in my virtual environment. And then I go virtualize my 9 o'clock, and I can replicate that issue that I was having on my production machine where it's crashing, because of the changes that I made. So what I can then in turn do, I'm like, you know what? I just want to pluck this one bad instance out of this chain of events of backups that I've done without compromising anything else. I can go to this 9 o'clock backup, click delete local. It makes you, say like, hey, you sure you really want to delete this stuff? You say, yeah, actually I do. And what it's doing, if you can imagine or envision with me, a chain with a bunch of links in it, and all you're doing is plucking out one of those links in that chain and then fusing that chain back together as if that link never existed. So now you can see how that 9 o'clock isn't there anymore. So what this does for me is that if I need to do a recovery from 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, whatever going forward, it will now incorporate what that database was before the issue occurred, because as far as data is concerned, that 9 o'clock backup never existed. So this allows me to retain all that information that changed since then, when that issue occurred, that I plucked out of that whole chain or sequence of events. And that kind of really just encompasses or echoes what I said in terms of every backup is independent of one another. No backup is reliant on each other at all. So definitely some pretty cool scenarios to help you out of, a scene where it could become compromising or detrimental to the production that you're trying to perform, within your business environment. Really, really cool technology. So I'm going to jump into the Restore tab now and show you some of the ways that we can do this stuff. So this is the fun stuff. It's a very simple UI. There's just 3 columns here. The first column, choose a system. All the different servers and workstations and virtual machines I'm backing up, they're all listed here. Second column, choose a recovery type. These are all the different types of restoration acts I can do for that particular environment that I'm backing up. Let's just say I want to do a file restore, like a granular file restore. Third column populates with a drop down of all my successful backups for me to choose from. I'll simply choose one, and you go through a mounting process so you can access the files from that particular recovery point. So really all I'm doing is creating a bridge on my network between the data appliance and myself. So what happens is once I mount it, I have 2 different ways of how I'm going to access that information. I can either click on this web share link. This is good for folks that aren't on the network to access that information. But more often than not, you're probably going to grab this Samba share here that gets created. You just copy and paste it right in your search bar. There's the C and D drive from that particular recovery point. Cruise down through the directories, grab any files and folders you want, copy and paste where need be. Very simple, sleek, and easy. It's a solution or a UI that we're all familiar with. It's just Windows Explorer. There's the IP address of my
I
data.
think your screen, we're not seeing that second piece. I think it's
Oh, you know why? Okay, so that was actually Windows Explorer. It's because this. Let me see if I can share that real quick. Hold on. Going back to the share. It only allowed me. It wouldn't show my whole screen. It let me share like a specific application. So let me see if I can change that. So add share screen. Open in browser. Okay. Calendar, mail. How about that? This I like better. I think now I'm sharing the whole window.
Well, you're not. Yep. Here we go. It's coming in
So you
now.
can see that.
Yeah.
Can you see this now?
No.
Okay. Well, something's going on with the screen share there. But essentially what I am showing, let me see if I can try one more time. We'll go back to this guy. Screen sharing. Change screen. How about entire screen? Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. All right, so now, can you see it now?
Yes.
Ah, look at that. The technology guy made it work.
Hey,
Okay.
all right.
So sorry about that. So you can see across the top here, that's the IP address. So what I originally said is there's the C and D drive from that particular recovery point. So that's what happened. As soon as I threw that in here, this occurred in my Windows Explorer. I cruise down through the directories, grab any files and folders I want, copy and paste where need be. That's the IP address of the Datto appliance that we're working with right now. That's the timestamp that I chose in that recovery point dropdown, and then the C drive going right through the directory. Folks coming from tape see this and their jaws drop right through the table. But I am sorry that they are coming from tape, though. But it makes them very happy. Unmount. So basically what's happening here now is I'm just throwing resources back to the Datto appliance. So that's how the granular file recovery works. And then the other options in here too, you have volume level restore. So that's the same concept as a file level restore, but you're just mounting it as an iSCSI target, thus preserving ACLs. You have virtualization options that I'm going to get to in a second. I'm going to circle back to that, but I want to touch on these folks down here. You have bare metal restore. So that's if you want to do a full-on re-imaging back to a physical piece of hardware more often than not. So it's an ISO imaging perspective. So from a USB gig stick, all you're doing here is taking a gig stick. It has to be 8 gigs or more. Stick it into a computer, on the network. Go to our download website. You're going to download an ISO to that gig stick. Go to that new piece of hardware that you're looking to re-image to. Boot up off that gig stick. And it just communicates back over the network to your Datto appliance where all your backups reside. From there, you simply select a recovery point, and the Datto appliance will start to copy over the rest of the information to make that bare metal restore full and complete re-imaging back to that new piece of hardware. And you can go to dissimilar hardware if need be. So you have a lot of flexibility there. Exporting images. So more often than not, you're probably doing this because you're going back to a virtual environment. I want to take a recovery point and I want to format or reformat that recovery point into a VHD, a VHDX, or a VMDK, and then go and install it on my hypervisor where my virtualizations reside or are being hosted. You can also leverage this as a P2V or physical to virtual. Let's just say that you have some physical servers out there and you have a newly implemented VMware or Hyper-V environment, and you don't want to completely start all over again on these VMs. You'd like to just port over those existing physical machines. So what we can do is take a recovery point that was once a physical, reformat it into a VHD, a VHX, or VMDK, and then you can go and ingest that into your new hypervisor and pick up right from where you left off. So you just did a P2V conversion right there. If you're running VMware, we can upload directly into VMware. So directories associated or with the locally attached storage within VMware. That's all configurable right here under configure hypervisor connections. You can see in here that I've added a couple hypervisors. This just gives me access to those data stores that are associated with those hosts. So now everything can communicate and work with one another. Lots of flexibility there as well. And now getting into the virtualization aspect. So you can see you have 3 different options here. So local virtualization, virtualize in the cloud, and virtualize via the hypervisor or a hypervisor that you've associated, based off this configuration I showed you earlier. I'm going to show you what the local virtualization looks like in a second, but I want to touch on these 2 guys down here first. So virtualize in the cloud. So essentially what that means is you're making a call up to our data center and saying, hey, I want to virtualize this particular recovery point, but I want to keep it on the network that I'm currently on, like where my Datto is. So what happens is a call is made up to our cloud. It streams down that recovery point over your internet service provider via a VPN tunnel, and then communicates through the Datto appliance. The Datto appliance that you have on site acts as a gateway to sustain that VPN connection or a site-to-site VPN connection. So that cloud virtualization is now essentially on your local network, but coming from our data center. Pretty cool stuff. And then you have virtualized via hypervisor. So let's just say, this is all kind of in the name of like load balancing, if you will. Like you kind of want to spread the love a little bit. Like I don't want I want to spin up a ton of virtualizations, but I don't want them all coming from my data. I kind of want some coming from the cloud. I want some coming from my host, so I can really ensure that I have a lot of resources associated with each one of these VMs. So all I'm doing in this situation is I'm making a call out to one of those hypervisors that I predefined to be the startup engine. So vSphere, that's VMware, essentially saying, hey, VMware, I want you to spin up this particular recovery point for me. Use your engine of VMware to spin it up. And in this instance, the data appliance is just more or less viewed as a locally attached storage to that host. But let's look at the local virtualization from like a UI and a functionality perspective. It's all the same. So you choose your recovery point, like everything else we've done. Start restore. It brings you into this UI where you're going to decipher what are the resources that I want to append or dedicate to this particular virtualization. I'm actually going to do a different server here. Let's do my 2012 server. Why not? Choose my recovery point. Start the VM. You'll notice up here in the upper left-hand corner, you have available resources. These are the resources on the actual data appliance that we're going to leverage right now. So down in here, you can see I dedicated 1 core CPU, 4 gigs of RAM. It's going to pull out 4 gigs of RAM from this pool right here. You're going to notice this is going to drop down from about 11 gigs down to 7 gigs. It's just going to pull right out of that pool there. Keep in mind, in terms of dedicating these resources, is that RAM is prescribed, right? So dedicated. So you can see how it just dropped down to 8 because I dedicated 4 gigs of RAM to this particular virtual instance. And then the CPU is shared. So when I say I want 1 CPU for this particular virtualization, that just means I'm capping myself. Like don't use more than 1 CPU. Because the data does a lot of things. You can be performing lots of virtualizations, but the data appliance might also be performing backups or offsite of the data center. And it needs CPU to do those sort of actions. So I'm just saying, hey, if I want to dedicate 4 CPU to this, I'm just saying don't use more than 4. But if I'm only using 1 or 2, something else in the data appliance can share in as well. So that's why I didn't pull out of that pool there, like the way the RAM did. Down here, you have networking options. So, how you want to be connected to this virtual instance. You can be disconnected like I am right now. You just want to spin it up, make sure files, folders, apps are all in place. It's bootable, but you don't want to have a conflict with something else on your network. You can also be firewalled on a private subnet with or without internet access. So this is more like your sandboxing type of solution. Like let's say you get a Windows update, a security patch, or an update to an existing application that you house in your environment, and you want to ensure that it plays well in the sandbox with the other kids before you release it, into public there. So this allows you to do a little isolation there if you want to. But more often than not, you're probably going to bridge the primary NIC. And that's if you want to do like a full-on replication of what your end users see day in and day out from a connectivity and accessibility perspective. You make any changes, you click apply to make it stick. It gets reflected over here in the summary. Click the start VM button. You get a little preview pane here, so it'll show you, what's going on in the background as it's booting up. And once you're ready, you can just click right on the screenshot, and it'll do a VNC connection. When really what that means in this scenario is this is opening up a new tab for me. And once you're authenticated, boom, you're on the desktop, business as usual, same as it ever was. And the cool thing about these virtual instances is that while your users are working here and you or whomever else is working on that production machine to get it up to snuff, the scheduled backups will continue. So this is that business continuity perspective, right? All kind of coming back to fruition. We are now looking at this data virtualization as the production machine. People are accessing, the file server that might be associated with this, any sort of databases that might be associated with it. We're continuing to take backups as if it was the production machine, so that when you're ready to go back to, your production environment, all you need to do is do one of those restore actions that I showed you all previously in terms of how you want to get back to production. So whether it's a granular file restore, whether it's an image export, whether it's an ESX upload, whether it's a bare metal restore, you have lots of options in terms of how you can be able to get back into production. And we also do offer the ability to virtualize in our cloud, right? So remember, going back to our hybrid model, what happens if this local data appliance becomes compromised? You can perform the same functionality up in our data center. You just make a call to our support, so Ikram and crew at MVP can certainly handle this for y'all. And we decipher how you're going to connect to these virtual instances in our data center. It's either via public IP addresses, VNC, or VPN. We try to leverage OpenVPN where we can, just because it gives a lot more flexibility. But we can also perform site-to-site VPNs if you would like. In that scenario, you just need a dedicated Linux box on the other end where you want to have the connection of the site-to-site between our data center and yourself to perform that handshake between the two instances. And so lots of options there for you. In the event, when you're ready to go back to production, what we can do is we're either sending you a new appliance with the latest data sets on it or the latest recovery points on it so you can perform your local recoveries. Or we can just ship the information on a NAS device or a USB device. Or we can do something called a rev send, where if you have a data appliance on site, we can take any changes that may have occurred in our cloud and push them down over the ISP to your local data appliance. So you have the latest and greatest, and sew up those loose ends, no matter what the scenario was in terms of your disaster recovery scenario. So we really have it down to a science for you in terms of getting you back into production.
So Chris, I mean, that's great. I mean, basically what Chris just showed us is imagining a server going down. We don't have access to it. We can't work. Well, before we fix anything or figure out what happened, we know that in time, that not too long ago, an hour ago, everything was working, or a day ago, everything was working. We can go back to a retention time and boot it up on the appliance and get up and running while we're still trying to figure out what happened. So that way, business continuity in case, even in the event of a disaster. And the fact that it actually does a backup at the same time and everything continues as is, that's the idea here of what the plan is. Thanks, Chris. I'll share my screen now if that's okay. If you're done.
You're very welcome. Yep, I am done. Unless there's something else you wanted me to share.
No, we're good.
Okay.
So that's the idea behind that solution. Now, this is a solution that we think is very important, but most importantly is the three things that we discussed. Know your risk. That's number one. And we talked about what the risks are and not having your data and what you need to do when in that case. And two is to implement a solution that allows you not only backup and disaster recovery, but also business continuity in place, because you want to minimize the amount of downtime that you have and be ready to respond. So what does that look like? So basically, backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity plans. A plan needs to be written. I hope you have a disaster recovery plan already written. If I have an issue, this is who I'm going to call first. This is who I'm going to call second. This is what I'm going to do. This is my IT provider is going to be able to do this for us. My internal person is going to do that for us, and have it all documented and discussed, and where the data that you care about and what's the minimal amount of application that needs to be running and what can take longer to bring back up. Everything has to be written up. And the disaster recovery business continuity plan, everybody should have one. You should also have an incident response plan. So assemble your emergency response team, knowing who is going to be not only called, but what you're going to do in the event of an incident. What's going to happen next? Not only from a technology perspective now, but also from a communication perspective, from next steps perspective, what happens and what you need to happen. You have to have those two plans, a DR plan, disaster recovery plan that has more technology pieces in it, and an incident response plan that encompasses all kinds of stuff, including calling your cyber liability insurance. And that's another thing that we highly recommend having, is a cyber liability insurance, because if you do have that and you have an incident, they'll help create an incident response team that will jump in and help us go through that process. But if we have an incident response plan already preset, that sets you up to win. And that's the idea here, is to have those three plans, the plans we talked about, the disaster recovery plan, the incident response plan, and to have cyber liability insurance. So have you reviewed your disaster recovery plan as of late? Do you have one? Do you know if you have one or not? Do you know what will happen when there is an issue? It's important to know that. And sometimes you may be thinking, I don't need to review it because we already have one, or we don't have to worry about disasters, or we don't have that much data, or I'm not worried about that. I'm in the cloud. I already talked about that. You should always have a tertiary backup of your data. The whole idea of the webinar is to make sure that you guys have control over your data, where it is and how it's backed up, and what will happen, what you will do if there is a disaster. What is your next steps? Who are you going to call first? Who are you going to call second? And how are you going to disseminate that throughout your employees and to your partners? Because really, do you really want to gamble with your data? I'd say not. There's too much to lose, really, when it comes to data. Because that's what you're all about. Your partners, your clients are trusting you with their data. You want to make sure that your data is there and is secured. But not only that, your actual data on who owes you money, who you owe money to, and all the things that comes with business need to be protected, because we rely on data quite a bit. So how can you avoid closing your doors after a disaster? Well, we said know your risk. So know where your data is, know what your plans are, make sure you have them ready, and make sure you're prepared to take action just in case, heaven forbid, something happens. And it's like insurance. Dead appliance or a backup, a solid disaster recovery plan, a solid incident response plan is like insurance, because you're only going to need it once for it to be worth all the time and effort you put into creating it. So here's what we could do. Get a third-party disaster recovery plan and cybersecurity analysis. And this is a link. You could scan it now. You could fill out the actual form now so we can get you guys up and running. Let me take you back there. And then we will review your disaster recovery plan. If you don't have one, sign up anyways. We'll help you, give you a templated one to be able to show you what yours should have. And we could help you through that entire process to create your own and create an incident response plan. But we'll also evaluate it, and we'll run a cybersecurity analysis on your network. Once you scan this, you'll just fill out a few things, and then we'll be able to contact you. We will not need your administrative credentials to do that. We will not install anything on your network to do that. We will just send you a link. You'll send it to 5 key users, because the important computers that you have, that you know have data that we're concerned about. Then you'll click on run, and then we'll meet with you and go over the report that we have. We'll be able to, in plain English, sit with you, review the results, show you what we think you've done right, what you should improve on your disaster recovery plan. If you don't have one, we'll help you create one, and we'll show you what holes we have from a security perspective to try to minimize the amount of risks that we may have. I hope this was beneficial. Obviously, NIST from a compliance, HIPAA from a compliance, all that needs to be in play already. But if you don't have it, we'll help you get there. The Scan Me, the QR code is there for you guys to fill out. So I'll open it up to questions. We're 5 minutes away from ending, so I love ending on time, which is always great. I appreciate everybody's time. So here's a question that I got. How much does it cost? Well, that all depends. It depends on the amount of data that you have and what we need to back up. So it depends on the plan that you're interested in, on the data that you have, where it is. Is it on just a local workstation? Then that costs a lot less. Is it just on in a cloud server? Well, that has a different price structure. Is it all on-prem for you? Well, then you have an appliance that we have to worry about. And that does have some kind of deals. If you sign up for 3 years, you may get the appliance for free and all that. So I can't tell you a price, but I can tell you that it's worth this money in gold. And an analysis needs to happen for us to be able to tell you what that looks like. But most importantly is those plans we talked about. If you're going to learn anything from the webinar today, and this webinar is for it's teaching, really it's educational, is make sure you have a solid disaster recovery plan, an incident response plan, and have cyber liability insurance. And have us review it for you. And we'll review your cybersecurity while we're at it. I'll leave that here for you to scan it. We'll review it and let you know where the holes are. Even if we're your IT provider, we look at it from a different lens. Some of you have a lot of our tools. Some of you have just our standard security stack. Some have our DR plan. Some don't. We'll help align everybody to pull in the same direction and get you there. Okay, Connie, thank you so much. You'll be contacting Ben for that. And Eric, as a current Datto customer, how do we access the Datto web portal? That's something we could show you, and we could log in and show you how we can give you access to it. We'll have to set you up as a user in the portal because it's not linked to your network. Because what Datto does well is really isolate your backup, but does run all the backups really well. So what I mean by that, if a hacker gets access to your network, you don't want your backup server to be sitting on your network, because if they have an authenticated user with a username and password that have rights to jump around from one machine to the other, they'll be able to jump on that backup server and delete your backup. And they do that. They look for it. Datto is outside that environment. They can't reach it. It's not linked to your domain. So we'll have to create you, Eric, we'll have to create you as a user in the web portal and give you access to it. Very simple to do. I'll take note and make sure that your PSM calls you. My pleasure. You're welcome. And then Connie will, please fill out that form, will be the easiest way, but I know you'll be contacting Benny, so I'm sure he'll come and let me know what you need. Okay, any other questions from anybody? Please let me know. As you know, I'm always available. You can call me at any time. My email is ikram@mvpworks.com. You can call your PSMs, get a hold of us. If you have any questions for Chris. Chris, thanks for your time today. I know how busy you are, sir. And
end of month, end of quarter, no problem though. I make time for you guys.
I appreciate you. So thanks for the time, everybody. And I hope you found this beneficial. And we'll see you next month for another webinar.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Bye, Lynn. Thank you. Thanks for coming.